And welcome. My name is Stephanie Smith. I will be walking you through this brief webinar today about sexuality, education for individuals experiencing intellectual and developmental disabilities, that is IDD, and why it is a liberating act to not only discuss but promote conversations around this topic. This is a conversation about autonomy and identity and how we as care staff can work to better support individuals in ways that honor both their rights and their humanity. This conversation will begin with a brief history on disability rights, systemic barriers based on social constructions of what it means to be developmentally disabled and a sexual being. We will discuss the ideas of consent, our own biases and beliefs as care staff, as well as queer identities. Introduction. My name is Stephanie Smith, and I go by she, her pronouns. I'm a qualified behavior consultant intern pending my graduation in 2026 when I will be a full-time behavior consultant. I'm here in Southern Oregon, and before that I have 13 years of experience as a direct support professional for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. I'm currently in my last year of education at Southern Oregon University, getting my Sociology and Anthropology major degree, as well as a Gender, Sexuality, and Women's Studies minor. And the focus of my work has primarily been on this intersection of sexuality, queer identity, and disability. So everything I share today is coming from 4 years of research as well as real-world experience supporting adults and youth with IDD. And where we are now, we need to understand the history, specifically the treatment of individuals experiencing IDD and how it is rooted in this idea of eugenics. So eugenics is a pseudoscience that became popular in the 19th and 20th centuries. It focused on controlling who was allowed to reproduce and used genetics as this enforcer to promote sterilization of those who seemed unfit. Of course, we know that those who were seen as undesirable or unfit were typically the poor, disabled, immigrants, and people of color. So this disproportionately did affect individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities who were labeled as feeble-minded. This all started from this 1927 court case, which was Buck versus Bell, where a woman named Carrie Bell was essentially forced into sterilization, as was her daughter. Under the pretense that her mother had a disability, she was assumed to have a disability, and the assumption was because genetically those things were passed that her daughter would also have a disability. Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., that's a mouthful, he was the judge on that case. And he is on record having said 3 generations of imbeciles is enough, and this is one of the first times that we saw this kind of forced sterilization. Over that 20th century, between 60,000 to 70,000 individuals were forcibly sterilized in the United States alone. And keep in mind that this was disproportionately affecting, people of color, poor, and people with disabilities. This history leave us heading into the 21st century? And why does sexual education matter? So although we don't engage in eugenics to the same degree that we did, there is still residual negative outcomes for individuals experiencing IDD, and a lot of these fundamental beliefs that are still pushed in narrative now. So individuals who experience IDD are often left out of important conversations about sex relationships, queer identities, and consent. This opens the door for further isolation, abuse, and loss of autonomy for a group that is already vulnerable. And many incidences do go unreported for reasons such as communication barriers, being taught to allow caregivers to handle their bodies. We don't teach people autonomy. Or fear of abandonment from a caregiver. Oftentimes, this abuse is coming from someone who is supposed to be assisting. So when we don't educate people, we are not protecting them. We are actually putting them at greater risk of abuse and not noticing or being conscientious of when that abuse happens. In fact, we do know that individuals with IDD are significantly more likely to be sexually abused. Studies can't come to an affirmative answer, but it's anywhere between 4 to 7 times more likely. Today, the gatekeeping looks a little different from forced sterilization, although there are still plenty of individuals who are coerced into doing that as well. Today, we see things like diagnostic overshadowing, that is, attributing the behavior to the disability to imply that people are being problematic or behavioral when they are expressing sexuality or discussing LGBTQIA identities. So that is one way that we're seeing this gatekeeping of sexuality. We also see individuals who are misinformed on purpose, such as being told that kissing will lead to pregnancy, and although this is something that is done as a protectant, it's actually causing more damage than helping. Of course, we don't want to be lying to the people we support. Sometimes we see care teams imposing their personal beliefs onto individuals, such as saying that queerness is a sin. This directly violates the rights of the individual, who should have the same right to their opinion as anyone else, according to both our Constitution and the ADA Act. We want to be treating people as we treat ourselves, and people are more alike than different. There is also this kind of passing of the buck that happens when each member of the team may feel that it is not their responsibility to educate or support differing identities. When we choose not to engage, we send this message that there is a shame around sexuality. And we also leave the people we support open to abuse, because what we don't know. So we want to be engaging in those conversations. Still systemic barriers that are faced on a more macro level, such as sexual education being absent from SPED classrooms or not including all aspects of sexuality. Things such as only talking about abstinence or only talking about reproduction and not speaking about the other ways that sexuality is beneficial to humans. Additionally, we see a lack of support around provider training in IDD services and policies that prioritize the right of the guardian or agency over the right of the individual. For community access, we find individuals are unable to attend events or groups supporting their unique identity based on things like short staffing, funding, and in some cases, providers choosing not to support transportation because of their own discomfort. Again, this is promoting shame around sexuality, which is perpetuating a lot of this abuse. So we need to remember that if we are claiming to be person-centered, if we are claiming to support independence and advocacy in what we do and who we support, we need to have sexual independence and the right to differing identities be a part of that conversation. It's for educating individuals on sexuality. So a big one is going to be our knowledge of consent. We understand that individuals are significantly more likely to be sexually abused, up to 4 to 7 times more likely than a neurotypical individual. So with that said, knowledge of consent is very important. This is the ability to identify when we are being abused. And if we are not teaching people about what consent means, they may not realize that what is happening to them is in fact abuse. There's also the knowledge of STIs and safer sex practices, so making sure that people are using protection and making sure they're not, coming home with things that they might not know what's happening to their body. Knowledge of what is abusive or aversive, again with that consent. So what does it mean to say yes, and what does it mean to have that violated? Knowledge of pleasure, very important. We don't discuss this very often as a society, but the benefits of sexual pleasure, of connection with another person, and what those can do for us. Those are things that are important to not shame people into feeling. The knowledge of sexual identities and validation and desires. So knowing that there are different ways to experience sexuality, there are different ways to desire in general. So we are acknowledging those and we are supporting people through those conversations. And then again, that decrease in shame. We don't want to be shaming people for their sexual desires. It's a natural human response. or identities, because that is also something that is a natural thing. What are some things that we can do to take action? How are we able to better advocate for the people that we are supporting? So first off, I want to note that we do not need to be experts. We just need to be willing to learn and to have these conversations respectfully with the individuals we serve, as the humans they are and as the humans we are, keeping in mind that we are more alike than different. So the first point here I have is speak up. We don't need to be experts, but we do need to be willing to learn and communicate respectfully. Making an environment where it is safe to ask questions and where you can work on empathetic response is crucial here. Make sure that you understand what the individual is saying to you by clarifying, and then make sure they are understanding you in return. We want to be educating ourselves. This is another important component. You have what you learned here in this training, and I will have access to other sources here as well, for just a good jumping point for you. Again, we don't need to be experts, we just need to be willing to learn. We want to be challenging our assumptions. We all have our own biases and beliefs, and when we challenge those, we are able to grow. When we are supporting the people in our lives, we need to think about, what are we assuming? Are we assuming that they are unable to experience sexuality, that they're unable to experience sexual identity, those sorts of things, right? So we want to be looking at what we assume. Sexuality and queer identities are not a behavior to be managed, and they're not problematic. They just need supported. So speaking up is powerful because it shifts the reality of how we support the individuals. We have this concept of calling in. So calling in is not making people feel bad for things that they said, but maybe going in with the assumption that maybe someone didn't understand exactly what they said. So in this case, if a coworker were to say something negative about a client's disability, related to sexuality, that we could step in with, questions about why might they have said that. So when we take the time to question and reframe what a coworker, parent, or employer has said about an individual, we open up to new opinions and mindsets. We also decrease this marginalization of individuals with disabilities and more normalize their experience. Supporting self-advocacy means simply believing the people you support and uplifting them. Practice asking the people you support what they want and what they need. Practice giving them as much autonomy as you can. This will support a group that is historically told what to do, to self-advocate. This training is decent, but I can acknowledge that my role is limited, as I am not a disabled woman, so my viewpoint is limited. Follow up with groups and organizations that are maintained by individuals with disabilities, if you want to seek further education, and I will also have some of those linked in this as well. Resource for you, I have this flyer that I designed. It's a pamphlet that can be distributed that goes over the information that was in this webinar, as well as what to say, what to say versus what not to say, those sorts of things. So if you are interested in obtaining this, you can go ahead and send me an email to the email that's in the contacts of this video. Additionally, I want to share some organizations that provide further training that are meant for not only support workers, but for individuals experiencing IDD to learn about sexuality, identities, and self-advocacy. The first one I have is Elevate Us Training, which offers high-quality, disability-inclusive sex ed training. I have NCIL, which offers trainings for individuals with IDD to learn about Sex 101. So what is it? What is gender? What's a healthy relationship look like? Etc. And then I have Project Shine, which is created for youth with IDD and contains information about informed consent, sexual and reproductive health, and it includes things like games and other cool interactive tools for people to use. Materials that are put out by organizations that are led by individuals with disabilities. Each resource is going to address sexuality, rights, and identities in different ways. The first one we have is Nothing About Us Without Us. This is a great fundamentals book on advocacy for and with individuals with disabilities. It's a must-read for anyone doing this intersectional work. From that, we have Nothing Without Us Collective, which centers around disability justice, consent, and anti-violence. We have the Rainbow Support Group, which provides LGBTQIA+ peer support and education specifically for individuals with IDD. And then lastly, we have Sins Invalid, which focuses on disabled embodiment, sexuality, and liberation through performative and visual art. This group focuses on disability as a whole, including IDD. The research I have used for this presentation is here for you to look over if you want to read any of the material for further education. This work, as I said, has been a focus for me for the past 4 years, and I am proud of what I have accomplished. Please feel free to reach out to me with any questions or comments. I would love to hear your thoughts on the subject. Thank you.